Hi, I'm back. Day 3 now. I'm working half days. Yesterday's video, I moved all the harnesses away from this 2008 CTS 4, and I forgot to mention that I couldn't get one of the plugs out. It's a sensor that's hiding inside a kind of protector for heat, I guess. And that thing is seized in there. I'm scared of breaking it. So I ended up just cutting the wires. There's enough, I just had to unwrap a bit of tape, and there's another 2 inches at least free on the harness, so I can resplice it later on. Either I'll get it off the engine and splice it and then plug it back in, or I'll put the engine back in with this thing like that and then just splice the wires. Access is good. So where I was yesterday was at the CV joints. So that's what I did. I looked on YouTube, and I found a video that told me I needed to remove the top ball joint and remove the tie rod, and that would be enough to pull out the CV. After, of course, removing the big nut, which is a little more than a 35. I bought a 35 socket. I think a 36 would have done a better job because I had to hammer on the 35, but it worked. And I got this out of the way, but I found out I had to remove this thing here to give me some loose on the ABS wire and on the brake line. And then that fell down, but it still wasn't enough. So what I had to do is to loosen this nut almost to the point it came off, bang over here to get it to pop out. And now that gave me just enough room so I could compress the CV and pull it out. It wasn't too bad to pull out. I was able to, on the driver's side, you're able to get in here and pry. It's fairly easy. On the passenger side, same story. For the spindle, I had to loosen the lower ball joint also. And this one, you could see, it was a little bit harder to pry it apart. But eventually, with the 2 screwdrivers, I was able to pop it out, and that little snap ring let go. Next thing I did is I removed the alternator to create some access. Plus, at this point, I was thinking of removing the timing cover and having a look at the lower timing chain setup to see how that was. But it became too involved, and I got back on my plan of removing the engine and checking those things later. In the meantime, that created a lot of access. It was good that I removed it. It's simple. You've got 2 bolts that are very easy to get at. And then there's a hidden one behind here. So that one is, the 2 front ones are 15s. This one's a 13. And it's a bit hard to get at, but you can get it. And over here, there's another bolt, and that's holds the clamp of the coolant tube that goes to the back of the engine. Said coolant tube being this one here, and that's the clamp there. So I had to remove this because as the plan is to remove the engine from the top, I had to remove the 6 bell housing bolts. There's 9 bell housing bolts. That was all. 8 were fine. And the last one was on the passenger side bank, not there's 2 of them, one on each side. And that one on this side here was the only one that is not easily removable. The problem with that one is it's got that tube that I showed you, and then it's got this tube in the way, and the bolt is like right underneath here. So what you got to do is first remove this. This fits like that, well, sort of, and goes into here, into this, I don't think I can reach it. It slides into here. There's a bolt there that bolts it that way. There's a bolt that bolts it to the head, which goes this way here. And that would be going in right here in the hole. Hey, I'm actually touching it. And so remove the 2 bolts. Now that the alternator's out, it pulled out. Okay, so that made access only for this guy. So your next problem is this thing. This thing, as you see, the 2 holes up there. This goes like that. Goes underneath. 2 bolts again. And you got to kind of pry it out and watch out so you don't, the top part is just a gasket, but the bottom part is inserted. So don't pry it this way, sort of pry it more that way, you know, like to pull out the bottom, not to jam the bottom in. Anyways, that goes back there. Once that's removed, then the last bolt is easily accessible. I'll tell you right now, that bolt's not going back in. I'm going to dress up the engine, put it on, and we're going to live with the 8 out of 9 bolts. I'm sure 4 bolts will be fine to hold everything together, so 8 will be plenty. Okay, so now I got the 6 bell housing bolts out, and access to, okay, I guess you can't see much from here. I'll show you this. I'll give you an idea. So my thought was right. Through the starter hole, you can get at the torque converter bolts. And obviously, I've got an extremely long, well, I got a long extension going in there. And to be able to do that, I had to remove the air conditioning compressor, okay, which you could see there's 2 forward bolts, very visible. They go here and here, okay, and then out the side of the block. So that's in the front, that's going into the side of the block. There's one at the top that's hard to reach at, and there's one at the bottom down here, which is fairly visible from underneath. So off comes the compressor, and I didn't break any seals. It's still charged. I'm looking at keeping it that way, lifting the motor, and hopefully not losing my Freon, if I can call it that. Then, to make access with that, that's just wonderful, except you find out that the bracket that was holding the compressor, okay, it sits like this on the block, and the bolt is backwards now, but the compressor was the upper and lower bolts are the bolts that hold the compressor from behind or the side of the engine, as opposed to the 2 forward bolts, which were highly visible. And then there's an extra bolt here that holds that bracket out. So you take that bolt out, the bracket comes out, and that permits you to run those extensions. Otherwise, there was too much angle and the extension was in the way. And then the next thing you know is you realize that, hey, the engine mount bracket is also in the way to get a straight line to get to the torque converter. So that's the next thing that you have to take out. Okay, and this goes on the block like this. Okay, you got 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 3 very easy to get. This one's tucked in, so you need to use a wrench. You can't use a socket and a ratchet. It's 15 mils. Then I removed the top bolt and figured, hey, pull the bracket out, but that didn't work. It's kind of seized in there, so I pulled the bottom out. And surprisingly, that just came out. Those are like, they're 21 mils. Those are big bolts, big nuts, I'm sorry. And once that came out, finally, yes, it does work. I have one out for now, but you can actually remove the torque converter bolts. So at this point, I got the bell housing bolts out, and I'm getting the torque converter bolts off. Then there's nothing else but to hook up the crane on it and pull the thing out, except for, okay, there's a bracket for these guys here. So the way it looks like is I can just take out that one bolt, which is here. And these are the cooling lines for the transmissions, and they're going to lay there and right to the transmission, and they're not going to be in the way, so that should stay there, and I won't have to make a big mess. I'm thinking of leaving the radiator in because I do have a lot of room, but we'll see how it goes. The compressor's a little bit in the way too when I move the engine out, and there'll be the hood to remove, I guess, but it's all straightforward stuff. What I'm going to try to do also is to support the transmission and leave it all hooked up the way it is and just pull the engine away from it. So that's the plan, and it's looking good, like I said last time, until I hit a roadblock. But for now, it's progressing as planned. All right, thanks for watching.